to lesson 3. Probably you are wondering because I will discuss this lesson with you, but Peter Hepen got a heavy cold and has no voice. Therefore, we will talk about data security, profiling of users, fake news, disinformation, and with regard to the safety of journalists, especially about threats, hate, and harassment. Of course, it's also beneficial for you personally to know about these dangers. Please keep in mind that we are not giving an all-encompassing advice for the virtual world, but are focusing on the UN Plan of Action on the safety of journalists and the issue of impunity. And here in particular on Section 7, Fostering Safety Initiatives. I am pleased to refer to this important document. Platforms and internet companies are monitoring us, monitoring all users about our purchases or if you have booked a hotel. And you will receive some offers regarding your last internet activities. Furthermore, our location is always known. Maybe you should disable it in your settings. If you have a Google account, you will receive your personal timeline, your trips, flights, restaurants, and moreover the last years. This is only one side. The other side is that a profile can also be used, for example, to get only information and opinions that match our previous profile in a search query. In this respect, our freedom of expression is restricted by these algorithms. When we talk about data security, everyone should take care on the settings of his or her browser to protect the private sphere. Criminals are always looking for carelessness of users. Therefore, all users need to respect some safety guidelines, do's and don'ts. This starts with privacy settings on the browser, a hard-to-guess password, and an up-to-date virus software. Check the internet for certified browsers, as cybercriminals can exploit browsers' vulnerabilities to access your data and your computer. Saying this, use the stealth mode of your browser or a real stealth browser. What else can be done beyond the settings? Activate Virtual Private Network, VPN, on your PC or on your mobile phones. Activate encryption software and use a strong firewall. In addition, anti-tracking and anti-ransomware would complete this little bit safer system. Besides the huge amount of data, the problem of the internet is that the web forgets nothing. Not your statements, not your activities in the social media. And against this background, even if it's not the subject of this course, members of the executive and the judiciary should express themselves very cautiously on social media as private individuals. Of course, we all and they are entitled to freedom of expression, but it should always be appropriate to their office as judge, public prosecutors, or police officers. Use the time to read this report of the special rapporteur. Thank goodness, the regulations and laws have become stricter in recent years and have improved for the benefit of the users. Let me mention the right to be forgotten. With the so-called Google ruling, the European Court of Justice made a remarkable decision in Internet Data Protection Law in May 2014. The court awarded those affected a claim against search engine operators for deleting search entries by name and, in this respect, establish a right to be forgotten. Fake news has become an emotional, weaponized term used to undermine and discredit journalism. Fake news is often used to influence political decisions. In addition, already existing opinions can be confirmed by reading fake news, especially if people are living in a filter bubble. You learned about this in Module 3. People who read fake news and do not have a particular idea about a topic that can be influenced by wrong information. The UNESCO Handbook for Journalism, Education and Training, it is expressed that one is alarmed at instances in which state authorities denigrate, intimidate and threaten the media by stating that the media is the opposition or is lying and has a hidden political agenda. This as well increases the risk of threats and violence against journalists. And how such violence can look like, you can see now in a video. Disinformation and propaganda are as old as mankind, but today's communication capabilities greatly facilitate the spread of this misinformation. Since it is not only about false information, but partly about a targeted hate rate, I would like to show you first a video of UNESCO. For your further studies, may I refer to a joint declaration by UN, OSCE and other international organizations about this topic. They expressed their fear about the growing prevalence in literacy and social media. Disinformation and propaganda are often designed and implemented to mislead the population. This may harm individual reputations and privacy or incite to violence, discrimination or hostility against identifiable groups in the society. Hate speech is a problem. And regarding the legal framework, I refer to Module 2 and the Rabat Plan of Action. But nevertheless, combating online hate speech is one of the biggest challenges we are facing, especially because these speeches are not necessarily confined to national borders. Discrimination and hostility are directed against individuals or groups based on various aspects like origin, skin color, gender, sexual orientation, religious affiliation or ideology, and much more. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Sana Hassan from Iraq. Please. Thank you very much, Dr. Hassan, for sharing your experience with us. To mark the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, Irene Khan, Special Rapporteur on the Promotion and Protection of the Right to Freedom of Expression, published in a collection of essays, Journalists Too, Women Journalists Speak Out. In unsparing language, the women journalists describe the threats and attacks they face, simply for being women, for doing their jobs, for exposing the truth and daring to speak out. The harassment and attacks range from defamation and disinformation campaigns, gender-based hate speeches, and trolling to rape and death threats, smear campaigns, and even threats against their family members. Some facts to illustrate this terrible development. Nearly 3/4 of women journalists reported experiencing online violence. Threats of physical violence, including death threats, and sexual violence also plagued the women journalists. To summarize in a nutshell this research. Not safe for work. Facebook was identified as the service to which respondents most frequently reported online attacks. Interviews in all 15 countries studied conveyed the same sense of futility as the survey respondents when it came to reporting online violence to the companies. Second, inaction, inadequacy, and ineffectiveness. Digital platforms need to take more responsibility for removing hatred and threats from their platforms. Threats targeting journalists as a group must also be taken more seriously. As important research, I highly recommend reading this research. Here is the link. There was evidence from studies research subject that Twitter monitors some highly vulnerable journalists and intervenes technically to choke online abuse in real time, sometimes making direct human contact to warn a target of impending threats. Women journalists, journalists of color, LGBTQ journalists are getting forced out of public discourse, which is increasingly taking place online, and sometimes even getting forced out of their professions. The occasionally heard idea that we can't do anything about online abuse, because if we do, we will limit people's freedom of expression, is completely wrong. Because the online abuse itself is what is limiting the human rights of so many folks who are marginalized already. Now they are getting marginalized online and in their profession to boot. In this regard, I must remind you to the limits of freedom of expression dealt with in Module 2. This is not an absolute right, but limited by the human rights of others. And regarding we can do nothing, we all know these kinds of statements. Oh, we don't trust this company. Or, I very often report to them hate speech and they don't react. Or maybe, I'm afraid of the opposite situation when our journalists are being blocked by them. We had a topic about period poverty, and there was an illustration of a woman with a stained skirt, and Facebook blocked our journalists for 24 hours for this story, and so on and so on. Should we really accept these kind of excuses? No, of course not. But this kind of censorship is not the only danger. There are 4 more dangerous worst cases of threats and consequences regarding the effects of journalists' publication. I am talking about statements that are supposed to enlighten, to expose grievances, and about courageous journalists who risk their lives every day and even lost their lives. Recently, again, a journalist was killed in Mexico, the 12th slain journalist, Ernesto Mendez, on the 3rd of August 2022. This year, in one of the most dangerous countries in the world for journalists. An immediate connection is not known, but there have been threats before he was killed. Unfortunately, the sad reality is not just the case, mainly because not the only one. Saying this, we will link here the webpage of UNESCO about these frighteningly high figures. The UNESCO has been recording all cases that come to its attention. That means more than 1,500 journalists have been killed just for doing their job and exposing wrongdoing for the benefit of the people. Nevertheless, we should continue to be sure that journalists around the world do not stop reporting on abuses and cases, even if not every journalist can receive police protection, and some are not accepting protection at all. Therefore, I do hope that we will receive news to be informed in the future as well. Thanks, and your next step will be lesson 4. Thank you very much and see you.